to you live.
Okay, thank you, members, and to Fáilte Rove a Lig. You're all very welcome to this morning's meeting of the Committee for Communities. We do have a quorum, and I now call the meeting to order. I welcome all of you to the 62nd meeting of the Committee for Communities. Can I remind anyone the public gallery at mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices, however, can be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to Assembly's Wi-Fi network. No recordings or photographs are to be taken. Can I also remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please use tablet devices discreetly in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and please be aware of the cameras and sensitivity of microphones as we proceed through the meeting. For those members joining via Zoom, can I ask you to please be mindful of whether the camera on your device is able to pick up any other people or images you do not wish to be seen, or if you wish to blur your background, and to please keep your camera on during the course of the meeting. So, thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 1, which is declaration of interests. I would remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. So, do members of any interest wish to declare? Kelly?
I'm a member of the deaf community.
Thank you, Andy.
Charity Trustee, Chair.
Yeah. I'm also a charity trustee.
That's all right.
Yeah. Okay, members, thank you very much. Online, anything there? No, I don't see any indications. Okay. Okay, members, moving on to apologies. Are Clerk aware of any apologies?
No.
Members aware of any apologies? No, thank you. Okay, members, moving on to Chairperson's business. You will be aware, members, that on Tuesday the Minister delivered a statement in plenary on the Equality Commission review of the Ulster Boxing Council. You recall that he spoke on recommendations and announced a new oversight mechanism which will be under his direct control and will complete in 18 months. A full copy of the Minister's statement and a press release from the Department can be found at items 6.17 and 6.19 of the tabled correspondence. It hasn't been that easy to access the report, the actual report that the Minister is referencing here. I think in light of that it might be useful to get the Equality Commission in to see what their take is in terms of the report and in terms of the Minister's interpretation and actions following that statement. Would members be content?
Agreed. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Just on that report, the Minister had actually more or less said it was his interpretation that there had been discrimination, but this clearly wasn't the conclusion of the inquiry at the time. In fact, in the settlement, there was no admission of any type of guilt one way or the other in terms of discrimination.
Yeah, noted, Melissa, and I think it is interesting to have those further conversations. Yeah. Any other comment, members, or members content that we... Nicola?
Thanks. Yeah, just to agree, I think it'd be really important to get the Equality Commission come in and kind of explain their side of it and what they actually had recommended, because we're hearing from one side really. So I think that would be a good idea at this stage.
Yep. Okay. Okay, that's okay, members. We'll ask the clerk to arrange that session, and we can take it from there. Then there may be other people who will then want to speak to other interested parties, but we can do that in a sequence. So thank you. Okay, members, then moving on, I've been asked via the Minister's private office to meet informally with members of the Westminster Social Security Advisory Committee on the 20th of November here in Parliament Buildings from 1 p.m. for approximately an hour. I actually may have some difficulty in accommodating that request on that particular date, but I would be keen that the committee is represented. I wonder, would there be any committee members who would be available to attend? I will also certainly attend if available, but there's a possibility I might not be able to. So I wonder, could any members indicate if they're available? November 20th to meet for approximately an hour from 1 to 2.
Just a week after committee.
Yeah.
Is that online here or?
No, it's here.
It's
in the building
there's
here.
A room.
I can go, Chair, if you need any.
I think it's useful to have a couple of members. If any other members are available or become available, I think it's useful for any members who are available to attend, but we certainly want to have some members committing to attend if we can, please.
Okay, we'll follow up.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we could just get a who all's going from there and what all they want to cover with
the
it.
agenda, yeah.
A bit of a brief. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
no problem.
wise, yeah. Okay. Thank you, members. Moving on then to agenda item 4, which is draft minutes, which are contained in your pack there at page 8. Do members have any edits or amendments in relation to the minutes? Are members otherwise content to agree the minutes of 6th of November as drafted?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. So, members, moving on then to item 5, agenda item 5, matters arising, and you provided with a summary table of matters arising at page 20. Can you ask if members have any comments or issues that you wish to draw out in or seek briefings in relation to items 5.2 to 5.7? There's a couple of items that I do just want to briefly draw out before I come back to members. Item 5.2 is a response to the committee's request to the Committee for the Economy and the Committee for Finance regarding a joint committee letter to the UK Treasury on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. The Committee for the Economy has agreed to support the letter, and a response is still awaited from the Committee for Finance. So are members content that the committee staff draft letter be brought back to this committee for consideration?
Yes, please.
Yep, thank you, members. Items 5.5 and 5.6 are responses from Mid-Ulster and Lisburn and Castlereagh councils on the forums for Better Homes, NI on housing decarbonisation. Item 5.9 in table papers is a response to the same issue from Fermanagh and Omagh District Council. Can I ask if members that I propose that when we've received a full set of these responses, we should review the collective responses and consider how we as a committee could support them? Are members content with that approach?
Agreed.
We compile all the responses. Thank you. Item 5.7 is an updated draft response from this committee to the Committee for Infrastructure on the Water Sustainable Drainage Bill. The amended response incorporates recommendations made at last week's meeting to include a request for clarification in relation to whether the flood protection grant could be made available to housing associations or social housing landlords. So can I ask, do members have any amendments or additions to this updated draft, or are members content that the response is issued to the Infrastructure Committee as drafted there? Who do we have indeed? Mark, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see that included, but could be made available to social housing landlords or tenants. Include tenants as well.
Are members content with that? Yeah.
Get that added.
Thank you. Okay. I further just want to also further flag up to members that items 5.10 and 5.11 of table papers are responses from Antrim and Newton Abbey Borough Council and Causeway Coast and Glens Council in relation to the anti-poverty strategy. So that brings our running total to 6 responses from the councils in relation to their contributions to the anti-poverty strategy. Can I propose we revisit the plan for a committee session to hear from council once all of the responses have been received? Decide how that might be formatted. Members content with that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So members, can I go back then in relation to any other issues that members wish to flag up or highlight in relation to this item?
Matters arising.
Aye, that's in matters raising 5.2 to 5.7 or indeed in the table papers. Okay, I think we're broadly satisfied then, members, is that?
Hey, Chair, can I just
Yeah.
go back to 5.12
Yes,
on
go
table
ahead.
papers, where the Minister has outlined the fact that there's the level of sign language in care homes and the development of sign language. I think this will help us when we were discussing clauses before, you know, by including adults, because older people who have lost their hearing through age-related matters, it's important that we don't have isolation. So I was pleased to see the Minister's response on that.
Yeah, members content? Yeah. Go ahead, Melissa.
5.3, just Ministers for Communities Funding announcement and budget planning.
Yes.
And
Melissa.
that we probably the correspondence outlines the publishing of announcement protocol followed the correspondence doesn't deliver the request for a briefing paper matching each of the 2025 announcements to its budget line and monitoring position. So maybe we should just ask again for committee briefings in relation to that.
Yeah, the point being it sets out sort of the announcements, but it doesn't really deal with the detail of what we needed. Yeah, Sian?
Yeah, just on that now, I agree. I think for us to be able to scrutinise, and also we're the ones that will be come to for comment on these things, and at the end of the day our job is to support as well as as to scrutinise. And if we don't know the, I suppose, the budgetary implications of some of the announcements coming through, it is very hard to do that. So it would be really useful to get us like a standardised, like post-announcement briefing, mapping each funding initiative, even to the relevant budget or to the monitoring around allocations, and just things like that would actually help us be more aware of where new initiatives sit and what their implications may be would be really, really useful.
Yeah, really important. Yeah, really important as well.
The committee has asked already in writing for each of these announcements to be mapped against the relevant budget lines.
Yeah.
And we are due to have a briefing on 27th of November in relation to finances, a financial briefing.
And I think we really need that information ahead of that briefing, so we can drill into those, because they're coming through a very specific and restricted form in terms of any scrutiny.
Chair, I was just going to say, I'd noticed in written questions that one of the members has asked for a detailed breakdown of the discretionary expenditure that the department has, outside of obviously Amy and everything else. Be interesting to compare the two whenever the answers come back on that, because some of these announcements appear to be discretionary, but they must be linked to funding headings. It would be good to see how that breakdown is happening.
Yeah.
Detail of the discretionary spend
that
breakdown
There's an MLA has asked for that in written questions
already. Okay.
So are members otherwise content with the matters arising memo as drafted there? Yep, thank you. Moving on then, members, to correspondence, item 6 in our agenda, and we're looking at on page 63 there, the correspondence memo is contained. As usual, we'll proceed through the correspondence bundle, and I now consider items by number in chunks, so taking blocks of them, and ask if you want to draw out, highlight or seek briefings in relation to any specific item of correspondence. So first of all, in relation to items 6.2 to 6.8, can you ask if members have anything within that particular block, 6.2 to 6.8, please? Go ahead, Kelly.
It's on page 70. We have communications from co-ownership. They outline the fact that when the property value limit was raised from 195,000 to 210,000, that they've had a good strong start to the year. I'm just thinking in the future, because of the housing problems that are in Northern Ireland, it might be useful, if we have time at some point, to get co-ownership in just to seek clarification on that, because the level of funding for housing, I know that it has excluded some people from new developments, and I'm just wondering if we can hear more from them just about the co-ownership model in the over 55s.
Members content? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, that one maybe, I think actually we had also maybe considered whether or not asking for an update every 6 months might be useful.
Useful information, if committee were content to ask for it to be provided to us every 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's the information currently is about how many people are able to go through this process and the percentages, but within the housing context, co-ownership is one of those tools that we use for people to be able to access homes. I'm just concerned that there are areas, for instance, rural areas, where 210,000 doesn't touch the sides of some of the new developments, and it's just to get a follow-up from, maybe it'll have maybe in writing from co-ownership, just on where are the pinch points of where they're not seeing business coming through, because I'm concerned in my area there's some housing is way out beyond that 210,000. I know it seems like, you know, somebody's looking to buy a £210,000 house, they should be able to afford that, but we're talking about an ordinary 3-bedroom home now is beyond that.
Okay, well, if members are content, we'll agree to do that, and then we can consider whether, following that, we want to maybe seek a regular kind of update. So thank you for that, Kelly. Anything else in 6.2 to 6.8? Okay,
Sorry,
Sean?
just 6.7, Libraries NI. I know that we have in our forward work plan, there's a few different places that we've decided to go to or would like to go to. I'd really love to bring the committee to a library, particularly in an area where there maybe is deprivation, where it is a hub for so many things with the communities, just so we can really see the breadth that our libraries actually deliver and really focus in on that. I think they're absolutely just an essential service, particularly in our rural communities as well. I see it so much.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I absolutely think libraries are a door out onto the world, absolutely, and the work they do is crucial. They should be supported and encouraged and developed. So I think that is a really good idea. If members are content, we'll look up at an opportunity to take a meeting out.
Would committee be content to wait until Book Week next year?
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a great
So
idea.
it's not long past, so it would be in the next year.
But we already have
Okay.
a couple in the pipeline, so
that's a
it would be
great
lovely.
idea.
Yeah,
Great
that
idea.
would be a neat way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, members. Then moving on then to items 6.9 to 6.14. There's a couple of issues that I just want to flag up in these before I go back to members. So 6.10 there is we have written to the committee awaiting a response in terms of we've written to the department asking for the savings at the trilingual, removing the trilingual logos. It has actually come to my attention since that there may actually indeed be significant cost, and maybe the question we have asked is not comprehensive enough, and I wonder would members agree that we add to that and we write again to ask what the costs have been for removing that trilingual logo in terms of man hours or people hours and all of the other things that come with that type of change. So are members content?
Content.
Thank you. Item 6.11 then, members, relates to an individual complaint. The committee agreed at its two previous meetings to send responses to the individual indicating the committee is not empowered to act on an individual's behalf and suggest they contact the housing supplier directly or their local MLA. Are members content to respond again in the same manner?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 6.14 then, members, is an invitation to attend an informal meeting from the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Social Protection, Rural and Community Development to discuss the work of both our committees. It has been provisionally scheduled for Wednesday 17th December at 10 a.m. in Leinster House. I think it's a really useful opportunity. I would very much look forward to that, and I would like to try to take up the offer extended, and I'd like to see as many of us travel if possible. We can arrange that if members agree in principle. We can see how we arrange all of that. But would members be content we take up the offer?
Love to. Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And can I ask then if the committee are content for the committee team here to make arrangements for the committee to attend? Yep, thank you. Okay, members then, so any from yourselves then, 6.9 to 6.14, any other item in correspondence you want to draw out? Sian?
Yeah, it's more comment, not for us to do anything, but I think 6.9, we have seen over the last few weeks quite a few issues with our arm's length bodies. You know, a question was asked in the chamber whether during the minister's boxing statement, whether this meant he didn't have confidence in Sport NI. The minister said no, but one of his backbencher MLA said yes. You know, so there's definitely some issues there. We've seen the issues with the Arts Council, where the minister was clearly putting the focus and the, I want to say, responsibility or blame squarely at the Arts Council, who then said it's actually not us. You know, so there's definitely been issues with our arm's length bodies and just in terms of their relationship, I suppose, back into the department. So I look forward to the conclusion of the Finance Committee's review of the arm's length bodies, and I'm just wondering as well, just something for us to keep an eye on in terms of what response from the department is going back in around the arm's length bodies to that review.
Yeah.
So there's no action at the moment, but it's just really, I suppose,
Yeah.
for us to keep an eye on, because there have been
Okay.
a number of issues with our arm's length bodies.
Yeah, I think that's very, very valid, Sian, and thank you. That is something that we should certainly keep a close.
No response back to this committee at this stage.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's warranted at the moment. They've said that they're hoping to complete by 2026. I think so. It's really a watch and brief on that one, but
I wonder,
very
but
timely.
should we actually go further than that and ask the Committee for Finance, are they actively seeking comments from arm's length bodies about their sponsoring departments? I know that there's a case of nobody wants to bite the hand that feeds them, but there have been issues, and it would be good to know if Finance are trying to pull some of those out.
Members content with that suggestion? Proposal? Yeah. Okay, thank you, members. And final check then on those correspondence items. And else members want to flag up? No? Okay, thank you then, members. Can I then ask that you've also been provided with a table correspondence page at Memo 26, and those contains items 6.16 to 6.20. Are there any issues within that members wish to flag up or draw out? No. Are members otherwise then content with the other than the discussion we've had, with the items in the correspondence to be noted as per the memos?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, members. And moving on then to agenda item 7, which is an SL1. It's the Occupational Pensions Revaluation Order, NI 2025. Members, a copy of the SL1 is contained at page 352. The proposed rule specifies the revaluation percentages for preserved pension rates of members who leave a salary-related occupational pension scheme before pension age. The 2025 order will apply to members reaching their scheme's normal pension age in 2026. The order keeps preserved rates in line with price changes and maintains parity with Britain. The Department is required to follow the British position and cannot set a different percentage for the North. The rule is intended to come into operation on the 1st of January 2026. So, do members have any comments, or are you content for the Department to make the rule? Shall?
I've no real issue with, because I know obviously it's a parity issue with GB, but it's just around the communications and whether any communications from the Department are planned for employers, pension scheme administrators in Northern Ireland, just to make sure that they're aware of the new revaluation rate. And that's really my only comment.
Want to ask them about their communications plan then?
Just to make sure that all stakeholders, I think, are informed of that new revaluation rate.
Yeah, like these are really quite important, despite the fact there's not a lot really in terms of maintaining parity and making sure people are getting payments. There's often not a lot we can do. However, I heard a discussion yesterday in some of the radio stations. I think it was probably one of the WASPI women, but the impacts of some of these things, I only caught it probably about halfway through. The impact of some of these things can be horrendous, and very often for women in particular. So it's really important, I think, that those issues are being considered by the Department carefully. Any sort of issues unique to the fact that we have people living in a cross-border are being considered at an early stage, and that steps are being taken or information is being shared. So I think that's just a general comment in relation to it, but I certainly wouldn't want to see anything happen that would prevent people from maintaining all of their full rights under pensions. Clerk, are you content? Sorry, I interrupted you. You're content with that? Are members content with?
We're going to ask the Department what their complete communications plan is regarding informing all stakeholders who will be potentially affected. Yeah.
And can we ask what a particular consideration they take in relation to advice they need to provide the Department around any specific issues here relevant to our situation here?
In relation to NI specific?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any specific issues, yeah. If members are content with those, yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, content then for the Department to proceed to make the rule?
Yep.
Isn't that the process for that? Yep. Okay. Anything else, members, on that SL1? Yep. Content, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8, which is Historical Institutional Abuse Redress Board Retention and Disposal Schedule. So, this schedule was considered by the Executive Office Committee at its meeting on the 22nd of October, and at that time the TEO Committee wrote to the Department for Communities to ask what measures are being taken by PRONI in anticipation of the inquiry and the increased demand of access to records by individuals. The end of the statutory period for the enclosed retention and disposal schedule has been calculated as 25th of November 2025. This means that if the committee or any MLA wanted to table a motion in relation to the schedule, it would need to be tabled with the Business Office no later than 12 noon on 18th of November. TEO Committee revisited the schedule at its meeting yesterday when members indicated that they were content with the schedule. A memo in relation to this approval can be found at page 46 of tabled papers. So can I ask if members are therefore content to approve the schedule? Great. Yeah, members are content to approve, and I just want to, I suppose, put on the record these are important issues, and it's really, particularly when you see issues like historical abuse, that it's crucial that people retain the ability to access records that they need now or may need in the future. So I just think that's a general principle. but members content to note, so thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 9, members' departmental briefing, fraud, error and recovery bill. Introduction, pre-introduction of oral evidence. So
Outside.
they are,
Let me
okay.
in, yeah.
Yep, yep. So members, the briefing paper for this agenda item is contained at page 53 of your tabled papers. And I now like to welcome the following officials to our meeting. So we have David Tarr, who is Director of Social Security Policy, Legislation and Decision Making. And no stranger to committee indeed, might I say. David, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
We have Jennifer Gibb, who is SSPLD G7 Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill. Julie Nelson, Director of Debt Management, Benefit Security, Child Maintenance and Make the Call Wraparound Service. Mark Morrison, who is Acting Deputy Director, Debt Management and Benefit Security. Donna Atkinson, G7 Public Authorities Fraud, Error and Recovery Project, all joining us today. So, David, I invite you to make a brief opening statement and then we'll move to questions from members.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for inviting us here today. As I said, so I'm the Director of Social Security Policy and Legislation, so I have overall responsibility for the Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill, and colleagues with me here today have responsibility for the day-to-day management of the bill if it goes ahead, and also then the operational implementation of that. So, obviously I'm here today to talk about the Public Authorities Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill, which I will refer to as the PAFER Bill, because it's a bit of a mouthful. As committee are aware, it is proposed to introduce an equivalent Northern Ireland Bill to the Assembly. The GB Bill has just progressed to Parliament this week and is now gone for royal assent. The committee was provided with a written briefing on this matter in July, and obviously officials are attending today to address any points of concern or areas that may need further clarification arising from that briefing. As the committee will be aware, the PAFER Bill brings forward new powers to improve DWP's ability to address fraud and error in the social security system. The bill also includes safeguards, reporting mechanisms and independent oversight to ensure the proportionate and effective use of the powers being proposed. Fraud in the social security system is not a victimless crime. It is public services that suffer, and it is the taxpayer who is the victim of the crime. The losses are waste sums of public money which could be put to better use. Departmental fraud and error estimates available for the 2024 calendar year show that in overall terms, global loss, i.e. total overpayments, has increased from 2.9% in 2023 to 3.7% in 2024. In monetary terms, this equates to an overpayment value of £350.3 million, up from £240.3 million. During the same period, expenditure on benefits and pensions in Northern Ireland rose from £8.4 billion to £9.4 billion. The total rate of overpayments has increased due to customer fraud from 2% in 2023 to 2.5%, customer error from 0.6% to 0.8%, and official error from 0.3% to 0.4%. The measures in the PAFER Bill and the proposed equivalent bill for Northern Ireland will mean that more people are paid benefits and pensions accurately, more errors are found and resolved earlier, and more individual debts from overpayments are minimised. Any suspected fraud can be identified and investigated sooner, and there is greater fairness and effectiveness in DFC's recovery of debt. The PAFER Bill aims to safeguard public money by reducing public sector fraud, error and debt, and it is estimated by the UK Government that the new provisions will deliver total benefits of £1.5 billion over the next 5 years. The majority of the benefits projected for the bill, which equate to £950 million, are expected to come from the eligibility verification measure, with the remainder largely arising from new debt recovery powers. I will briefly summarise the measures being proposed in the bill in its Northern Ireland equivalent. The eligibility verification measure will improve DFC's access to important data from financial institutions to help verify entitlement, ensure payments are correct, and prevent overpayments and debt accruing. No personal information will be shared by DFC. The power will only be used to obtain information on accounts that receive a specified benefit and any accounts linked to that benefit receiving account if they match certain eligibility indicators, where it suggests someone may be receiving an incorrect payment. For example, those who are on universal credit and have savings over £16,000. Banks and other financial institutions will be required to share only limited information, and no decision on benefit entitlement will be made on this information alone. The measure will not allow DFC to see how people spend their money, and the Department will consider the information returned to ascertain whether any further inquiry or investigation may be needed. DWP have made clear in their legislation that prior to issuing an eligibility verification notice, there will be a duty on the Secretary of State to consider whether issuing such a notice is necessary and proportionate. We understand this assessment will consider the interaction with the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 8, right to privacy, as a part of this. The information gathering measure aimed to modernise DFC's information gathering powers when investigating suspected benefit fraud to create a clear legal gateway so that DFC can compel information from a wider range of third parties while making it more straightforward to respond via a digital platform. Currently, DFC can only request information from a limited number of third parties when progressing investigations into suspected benefit fraud. The aim is to create efficiencies for both DFC and third parties, helping to prove or disprove allegations of fraud quickly. The debt recovery measure aims to improve fairness in the recovery of debts owed to DFC. It will broaden our debt recovery powers to enable the recovery of debt more effectively and fairly from those who can repay but currently do not, bringing DFC's debt recovery powers broadly in line with HMRC. It will allow for money owed to DFC to be recovered from an individual's bank account by issuing a direct deduction order to their bank for a regular or lump sum deduction. This will apply where individuals are not on benefit or in PAYE employment, and these direct recoveries will only happen once affordability and vulnerability checks have been carried out. DFC's priority is to negotiate affordable and sustainable repayment plans, and we would only use the new enforcement powers as a last resort, where repeated attempts to negotiate a voluntary, affordable and sustainable repayment plan have failed. The search and seizure measure that's in the bill will apply when there are reasonable grounds that will allow a DFC authorised investigator to apply to a court for warrants to enter, search for and seize items that are relevant to the suspected offence when investigating only the most serious cases of organised fraud against the social security system. Again, the measure will give DFC powers similar to HMRC for investigating serious and organised crime against the government. Currently, DFC investigators must request that the police conduct these activities and can only act in an advisory capacity when attending premises searches with police. It is considered that this position creates inefficiency and unnecessarily burdens the police. It is important to note the police will continue to carry out arrests of suspects. Finally, the administrative penalties measure will remove the 4-week loss of benefit, a further financial penalty which is currently applied when someone who remains eligible for benefit accepts an administrative penalty. It's considered this will introduce greater fairness and proportionality to our response to fraud. The measure will also broaden the type of DFC payments where an administrative penalty can be offered as an alternative to prosecution following a full investigation. This is seen as a future-proofing move to align the Department's scope for response to fraud across both benefit and non-benefit payments. As I've said, the paper bill completed its passage of Parliament just this week on the 11th of November. It is expected to receive royal assent by the end of this year, and obviously that bill does not apply in any way to Northern Ireland. There have been a number of technical amendments to the bill during its passage of Parliament. These were aimed to ensure the bill and its set of critical safeguards operate as effectively as possible. However, the policy intent set out in the paper bill introduced by the UK government remains unchanged. I would just like to address officials are aware that there were two main areas of concern with the bill raised by Northern Ireland MPs during debate in the House of Commons. The first of these focused on the eligibility verification measure and whether it was excessive in granting powers to investigate the bank accounts of benefit recipients without reasonable grounds of suspicion. Concern was also raised around how this would impact landlords and appointees who may be receiving benefit payments on behalf of claimants. Secondly, the point was raised that the bill did not make sufficient distinction between treatment of a claimant who has received an overpayment either through claimant or official error and the claimant who has engaged in deliberate and planned fraudulent activity. This issue was noted around the use of the temporary driving licence disqualification deterrent. Officials have been and will continue to explore possible options to address these concerns as the equivalent Northern Ireland bill is being developed. And can I just finish up by saying the details of the Westminster bill will be operated and how that will be implemented operationally are still under consideration by DWP. They will be detailed in codes of practice, which will be out for public consultation. Our intent is obviously with the Northern Ireland bill equivalent, we would also carry a consultation on codes of practice, and of course we will engage with committee and any other interested stakeholders as we go along. That I appreciate is probably a wee bit of a detail, but it is a very complex bill, as I'm sure members will appreciate, and between us we're happy to try and answer any questions you might have at this stage.
Okay, thanks, David. And it's very clear, even from that brief outline, it's not only complex, it's extremely intrusive in many ways, I have to say. And it's there's obviously a huge range of issues. We're going to get into some of them now, but I think it's fair to say that the bill has garnered significant enough criticism at Westminster. Can I just clarify, so this is not like an LCM where there's a requirement to it, there's a choice by the department?
It's a choice by the department, ultimately by the Assembly. So under parity, and I'm not going to recite the party, I'm sure the members are aware of it as much as I am. Basically, though, we are required to, or our Minister is required to consider whether we maintain parity. So our default position in the department when DWP make changes to Social Security is, are we making the same changes? That's the stage we're at, Chair. It's, are we making an equivalent bill for Northern Ireland? Our Minister, Minister Lyons, has agreed in principle that such a bill should be brought forward. However, we are still looking at some of the policy options within that. Of course, the admission of a bill to the legislative programme is a matter for the executive, because it would be an executive bill. But ultimately, it is up to the Assembly to decide, and obviously this committee, to help shape what is in that bill and whether it progresses or not.
And how do the department plan to resource and oversee the implementation of it? What resource do you estimate would be required to implement this proposal that you're putting here?
Yeah, we haven't got an exact estimate at the minute of what the resource that would be required. There's some of the measures dovetail on some of the existing processes, so we don't see that would be a huge resource requirement. However, there will be additional resources at some stage. We could model that out and come back to the committee at a later stage in relation to what that would actually look like.
Well, I think so. So, in a situation where the department is already struggling to deliver on many of its core requirements, and you have yourself outlined that this is, in some senses, quite small percentages in the overall situation. I'm particularly concerned, I have to say, and probably my experience previously as a social worker, but this idea of civil servants being required or empowered to enter premises and do that without the support of police. I just don't understand how that actually would translate on the ground, or indeed the resource or training required or equipment. The police have the powers, the equipment, the training to do that. You're now asking a whole range of civil servants to step into that space. Will civil servants even be comfortable with doing so?
I think those are measures or provisions that we will have to consider, obviously, as we look at the impact of this for Northern Ireland. I mean, at this moment in time, we are taking what DWP, well, it's actually Cabinet Office and DWP, there are two parts to the bill. We're focusing on the Social Security part. We're taking those provisions in the bill and saying, right, do we need these in Northern Ireland? Clearly, the overarching principle would be generally, yes, we would replicate them, but as this committee will know, parity does not mean absolutely 100% it must be the same as DWP. So there are particular issues and concerns, not only from the committee members or from MLAs more widely, but equally from staff or other stakeholders on how some of these measures will be introduced in Northern Ireland. And those are things then that we would look at as the bill is being developed. And of course, we are at the very early stage of this. There's no executive agreement yet to the bill being introduced. We're starting as officials because we have to. The intent is to try and get this through in this mandate, assuming that the executive and the Assembly agree to that. There will then be significant significant opportunities, both for the committee and others, to scrutinise the bill and to shape the policy options that are in there. So those concerns, I'm certainly not dismissing them. Those are concerns we would look to address as we take a bill forward.
Okay, but I think we need to address the concerns before we decide on how they, and I understand you're saying that, but I'm just trying to visualise. So basically you're saying civil servants will be able to carry out raids on properties and seize items. Isn't that right? Are they going to be taking a sledgehammer or a lorry? How's that going to translate?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know that level of detail. The finer detail of exactly how DWP propose to make use of these powers, has not been shared with us yet. I assume that will be in their codes of practice.
It feels very inconsidered.
I appreciate that.
But the other thing, I'm going to quickly come to my last question. I'm going to get the members then, because no members are quite keen to get asking questions. So we know as a committee that official error takes place all the time. We've seen several examples of it. In fact, recently we have witnessed the outrolling of families travelling abroad and the system not recognising that they've come back home because they come back into Dublin. And the system will often try to blame people and follow that up as fraud. So how can you be sure that innocent people won't be unfairly caught up by these far-reaching sanctions, have their accounts accessed or a driving licence suspended, etc.? We're also very conscious of the tech issues around Fujitsu in the post office and the nightmare scenario that this can have in terms of the intrusiveness on people's lives and the impact on their lives, the most serious impacts we could see. So would you not have concerns yourself in relation to those types of error that are then treated as fraud?
I don't think we'd ever look to identify official error or indeed customer error as fraud. There are two elements to the bill in many ways. One is the enhanced fraud measures, and the other is the debt recovery powers. So the enhanced debt recovery powers, as my understanding, would apply where somebody has got an overpayment as a result of official error, and that overpayment is already recoverable within the Social Security system. I mean, Julie and her team are the ones who do the investigations, and so but I'm confident Julie can speak to this more. But as a department, we do not go and prosecute people for fraud if it's official error. I mean, investigations are carried out before.
Are you saying, David? Are you saying that it never happens?
I absolutely, I cannot say that. No, I'm not.
And I think we have seen examples where that has happened.
Yes, I can only try. As officials, we can take what measures we can to try and prevent, but I cannot sit here and say errors do not happen. No.
Yeah, and it would concern me that there would be an attitude that we don't make that mistake. That mistake does give me. Okay, I'm going to go to members. I have Kelly, Shan and Melissa at this stage indicating. Kelly, please.
Thank you very much, Julie. I may be coming to you a wee bit. It's about operational matters that we may have to consider through this. It came up in the last mandate. I can't remember what reason it came up, but we know that there are people who, if there has been, for instance, error and a person has been overpaid and the repayment is due, when the consideration of the debt recovery, the repayment is being made, it has never been clear for me if that person also has, say, for instance, a fine that they're repaying from the court. If that's all taken into consideration, the fine for that person is paramount, because if they don't repay that, they potentially could face imprisonment. Is there any consideration being made in this type of workings that when repayments or debt recovery is being made, that consideration is made of other liabilities that the person has that has to be met, otherwise they could find themselves imprisoned?
Yeah, so whenever we are talking with the individual, we will engage with them to see what they can actually afford to repay, and those sort of debts like credit card debt and fines, things that absolutely must be paid, otherwise will incur a further charge, they would be factored in, and we will, reduce the repayments back to the department as much as we absolutely can. I mean, down to maybe £5, something like that a week, just to make sure, because our aim is to make an affordable and sustainable repayment plan so that the person continues to repay. So we will make that as affordable as possible so that we can actually sustain the repayment until the debt is repaid. And we know that may take many years, and it is a low amount, but that would at least give the person the opportunity to pay off other more kind of penalty incurring debts rather than the Social Security debt.
Thank you for that. We know that the maximum that someone can have in savings is 16,000. Sadly, we have situations now where people, perhaps there's a small life insurance policy, a partner has passed on, the other partner receives, wife or husband receives a relatively small payment through that life insurance, but it takes them above that 16,000 threshold. How long, is there a consideration made as to how long the person has had that money in their account? With universal credit, we know that someone can go in and look and what their income has been over a period, the consideration period. It might be the previous one there was nothing, and then the next one here, lo and behold, there's 20,000 sitting. Is there any consideration made to that? Because I've had situations in the past where a person has had that exact thing happen and they have been requested to repay housing benefit. So I'm just wondering if that type of review of the length of time that the person has had money and a way to ensure that people, when they do receive a lump sum payment, that they notify and explain what that is so that they're not falling foul of the rules.
Yeah, we would always encourage people to report a change in circumstances as soon as that occurs. Whether that would be classified, if they don't report it, then obviously we would be looking to the fraud route, whereas if they do report it, you know, it will be taken into account and the decision maker will factor in how long have they had the money, have they spent the money, is it for maybe to buy a new property, something like that. All those things will be taken into account whenever the decision is being made, whether that impacts their benefit or not. I'm not sure, maybe Mark could answer this, whether there is an actual specific period of time in relation to how long they're allowed the capital. I think it is just on a case-by-case basis and what they plan to do with the money, what they received the money for, and maybe it is an inheritance that is going to be divided out amongst other people, for example, but I don't think there is a specific, 2 months, 3 months time limit per se.
No, it's just that if the money's there, it doesn't matter how long it's there for.
Okay. And can I finally then, Chair, the appeals, what's the mechanism that will be considered going forward for appeals for a person if they disagree with the decision that's being taken? I see in the paper there that there's talking about the appeal system there for the financial institutions, but does it carry on for a similar appeal system that you currently have, or
I'm not aware.
No, but we're working with the tribunals to see what there is in the bill and appeal rights for customers if they have a problem with the debts or whatever that they're being asked to repay.
I'm just thinking of that situation that I had. There was a lady who received it was about £20,000 out of a life insurance, and her husband's intention was that the life insurance was really for their grandchildren. I don't think they expected the husband to pass away so early, and she was about to divvy out the money and was told, no, you owe us money back. So it's that type of appeals I'd be sort of hoping that we'd be able to have that flexibility and consideration for.
Yeah, there will definitely be a human decision maker, and there'll be contact with the customer and taking all that into account before any decision would be made. So,
to be honest, none of us wants to see fraud, so whether this is a hammer to crack a nut, it's a difficult one, but to be honest, knowing yourselves, there is a bit of a heart there, so we'll see how that goes coming forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. Shan?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Kelly. There obviously is a heart within your department, and you do so well. It's more the infrastructure that you're having to have the heart within is quite worrying for me. And I worry that this is reframing poverty administration as a policing issue. And I think that there's definitely a lot of concern there amongst families that this, because it's that the suspected wrongdoing. I think the worry, and it was the Child Poverty Action Group that were most kind of I suppose adamant about that the eligibility checks without suspicion will subject low income families to surveillance by banks simply because they claim benefits. I think there is that concern that people will be punished and will be put under suspicion simply because of the position that they're in. So around that, the eligibility verification powers, that no requirement for evidence that what is being done is proportional or with good reason. It's just that suspicion. Can you clarify, I suppose, just David, what the process is again for me, if that's okay, in terms of that eligibility verification power?
yeah, well, there'll be an eligibility verification notice that will be issued to certain financial institutions, and more detail that'll be in the codes of practice that will be consulted upon. But the information will be as much information that we can get back from the banks. That requires us to look at the cases just to look and see if it's capital or working abroad or whatever. But it will go through a system, and things like appointees and landlords will be removed by that system. It'll then go to a human decision maker who'll make contact with the customer. I mean, there could be plenty of reasons why somebody has more than 16,000 in their banks, like compensation payments or something like that. So there'll not be a decision just made on that information coming from the banks. But it is very much a case of trying to make sure that people are receiving the right amount of benefit. Nobody wants a customer to get into debt and accrue a debt, so it's trying to stop that before it happens, so it'll be as little as information as possible getting through.
How many do we estimate this? Because it sounds like it's going to be quite intensive in terms of the resources that are going to be needed, between that kind of even someone raising the issue, then it being sent in terms of getting the paperwork together to put forward that eligibility verification request, and then someone processing it, and then a human decision maker. It sounds like it's quite a hefty, resource-heavy piece of work. Would that be fair to say?
DWP will be going through test and learn, and because we're behind them, we will obviously pick up on some of the experience that they have. So it'll be brought in a small way to start off with and built up as they bring in extra banks. So I think we're in a good position that we will learn and be able to establish what sort of resources are required.
David, you'd answered one of my questions about whether there will be any input from experts from
Yes.
Northern Ireland specifically around that code of practice, so that there will be a consultation for that.
Well, as far as I'm concerned as the director at the moment, yes, we will be consulting on the codes of practice.
Another question then I had was, we talked about how the Minister is required to consider parity. Would there be any financial repercussions if the Minister does not keep parity?
That's unclear at the moment. If we were not to pass the bill, or to pass a bill, and I'm saying using the Assembly was to pass a bill, significantly changed, but say some of the powers not matching up, or was to decide not to pass, there's obviously conversations we would have to have with DWP, and our colleagues in DOF would have to have with HMT, it's really up to the UK government then, whether they would assess that DFC not exercising the full range of powers DWP has available means that there is less debt recovery and less detection of fraud. We have not had any conversations with them about that, because they're at this stage where, for our point of view, we're at the very early stages of this, trying to prepare for a bill. Those are conversations we can have if it's progressing. But precedent suggests that for those who were here in 2012, 2015, the Treasury did levy penalties back then.
Okay.
Because of the delay in welfare reform.
There was a question then, it was something you'd said, Julie, around error and fraud. I'm just wondering, could people's benefits be stopped as a precaution before you realise that it's error and not fraud?
As a precaution. So what we would do is we would get the information in, but we will engage with the customer always. We would not take the raw data, for example, and just suspend benefit. So we would engage with the customer. Now, if, for example, that customer didn't interact with us after numerous attempts, and it would be numerous attempts, there may be an occasion where their benefit would be suspended if they just fail to engage with us. But that would be quite a number of times. We would look to speak to the customer, clarify what the money is for, why they've received it, what are they going to use it for, how long has it been in their account. For fraud, it would have to be a deliberate attempt to misrepresent their circumstances. It's much more likely to be customer error, where they haven't realised that they needed to tell us, or the money has just accumulated in their bank account and maybe they haven't realised that it's reached over 16,000. But for the fraud, it is an absolute deliberate attempt, and we have to prove that in order to take that for prosecution, that there has been a deliberate attempt to misrepresent. So there is the prosecution thresholds that we would have to meet for the fraud cases.
But there is a process before benefits get stopped.
Absolutely. We would have to engage with the customer and find out what the money, do they have the money in the first instance, is it correct, and also how long they've had that money, what is it for, and we would engage with them. Now, as I say, in the rare occasion maybe where they don't engage with us after a number of attempts, we may have to suspend just to get clarity on what that payment is for or what that payment is, but hopefully the vast majority of customers do actually engage with us. So.
Okay, and then my final one is really just around Northern Ireland has a much higher proportion of disabled people and people whose benefits are maybe being managed by relatives and carers. So when if we do replicate this legislation from Great Britain, could it unfairly affect those groups, or in terms of whether they're managing benefits for a relative or someone that they're caring for? That isn't something I think that GB has to consider just as much as we do, because we have that greater level of care and particularly kinship care, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we will be doing a quality screen, certainly on the measures in the bill, and if required, if we do think that there's a disproportionate impact on customers in Northern Ireland, it could end up with a full quality impact assessment. So we will certainly take that into account.
There is always the scope, Sian, for the bill to be amended, or for additional processes, steps to be put in place within a department, within our own guidance, within the codes of practice, to try and address. I mean, we're very alive to Northern Ireland having different circumstances than GB. It's not just always copy and paste, and that's why we're here. One of the reasons to get early engagement. We want to understand. I'm not naive enough to think that this bill is going to be popular, so
I'd hear it, David. And I think, just to say that whilst I would have confidence in terms of what the intent would be, just the nature of this bill just doesn't sit quite right with me. So.
Yeah, and it's not a question of it being popular or unpopular. It's about the impact, David. And I agree. None of us, like fraud should not be tolerated. But it's around, and I think there's a bit of an issue there. Just picking up on Shan's questioning around, there can be many reasons for a lack of response. It can be literacy, it can be mental health, coercion and control, connectivity. There's lots of different reasons. I'm wondering what protections are in place, particularly for children of families. And I know, for example, utility companies, I believe, are not empowered to cut off electricity, for example. If you're talking about cutting off the lifeline of people on very, very poor means, potentially because at this stage you still don't know that it's fraud or that it's even error or whatever. So what protections will be in place for children?
I don't know. I suppose what protections can you address? What protections we currently have? Because I don't. It's my understanding in the bill, and Jennifer's the bill manager across more of the detail. But my understanding that it's not going to make any difference in that context in terms of how we would treat those people. I mean,
it wouldn't matter if there's children in the house.
No. What I'm saying is it wouldn't make any difference to how we currently treat them. As in, I assume we already, and I am making an assumption because I'm not on the operational side. But I'll let Julie speak to this. We already will take every step we can to ensure that doesn't happen. We are not here to take people's benefit off them unnecessarily.
Listen, David. I like we always accept that that's not the case. What we're doing here is seeking to prevent unintended consequences or impacts that are overly intrusive or impactful or indeed wrong in terms of mistakes. So, Julie.
Vulnerability will always be taken into account whenever we're looking to suspend somebody's benefit, and as I say, look, that is an absolute last resort. There will be many attempts. So if we can engage with the customer, either through their UC journal, through their telephone number, and they tell us that they have difficulties, obviously maybe with English as their first language or something like that, we will always put in place something to address that. We will never suspend somebody's benefit if we know that they're vulnerable and that is their lifeline. We will not do that. We will look to see what else we can do or engage an interpreter or something like that to address the issues that we need addressed.
And I fully accept your genuineness in this, but I will say this. I have seen other examples where other sections of your department have been here around universal credit and the fact that home visits will be facilitated where they were needed. I have come across in the past number of months a situation where that absolutely did not happen on the ground in a very, very vulnerable situation. Now, the department and officials within the department worked with me very quickly to address that, but the reality of what we were told in committee and what transpired on the ground was different. And that is something we have to guard against when we're considering measures like this. So I just want to put that on record. But I do accept that. I do accept what you're saying, Julie, and accept that you all, and accept that not one of you want those impacts to happen. We're here to guard against them happening inadvertently.
And we're here to try and work with the committee to try and put in place. But as I said, we're not infallible. I can't sit here and say that mistakes will not happen.
Okay, fair enough, David. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, all very welcome again. And in relation to just the percentage of the total budget, fraud makes up less than 2% of it. And I can't help but feeling that, is this the case of a sledgehammer being used to crack a nut here? And in fact then, when I think of some of the draconian measures within it as well too, and how it will expose other members, we'll say, of a family unit, and in particular the clause that disqualifies a driving licence. And I know that has caused consternation in Britain in that as well, but is that likely to be considered here in the north of Ireland too, that'll be an element of this particular...
Yeah, so that particular measure, I believe our child maintenance service currently has the powers to do that, but my understanding, we have never used it here, and even in, I'm sure Jennifer has the figures, but even in England and Scotland and Wales, it's significant.
Yes, I have the figures somewhere, but it's more of a deterrent rather than actually being used. It certainly hasn't been used in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, we're not aware of it being used here. So
I have responsibility for child maintenance as well. So it hasn't been used. You know, it is an absolute power of last resort, and it will be the same in this as well.
Okay. Well, when you say it's more of a deterrent, what do you mean?
I suppose if people believe that they could lose their driving licence, will that deter them from taking fraudulent action and not reporting change of circumstances or whatever it may be that's actually leading to the fraud? Can I prove that that's a deterrent? No, I can't. It is perceived that it would be a deterrent.
Even in that respect, if there's a threat that for someone, and as I say again, like everyone else here in the committee as well too, I do think that fraud has to be confronted and dealt with, but at the same time, on the theme of it being a sledgehammer to crack a nut, I wonder then too, even we'll say within your department, how many people currently are employed in relation to fraud and error, including dealing with this particular bill?
In relation to fraud investigators, we have around 40 fraud investigators at the minute. We are in the middle of or at the start of a recruitment campaign though, so we would hope that number would increase to around about 60 fraud investigators. In relation to error, it's more difficult because there's operational staff within each benefit branch to look at addressing official error, for example, and taking learning from errors and making sure that those errors don't keep reoccurring or whatever, so it's much more difficult to put a figure on the staff that would cover error for customer and customer fraud, or sorry, for official error, but for customer fraud it's 40, which will hopefully increase to 60 by the end of the financial year, hopefully.
Just on the question on the bill, so Jennifer is the bill manager, so she leads a team of five people. That team also deals with the welfare supplementary payments, the welfare mitigation payments, so it's a sort of joint role.
And apart from, say, the objective of maintaining parity with Britain, such as any cost-benefit analysis been carried out in relation to the work that's carried out by your department at the present time and the resources that are deployed in order to develop, we'll say, this bill?
Not in terms of the resources deployed to develop the bill. No, we haven't done that yet. Honestly, I don't know that we would. Our default position, as I say, as a department, is when DWP introduce a bill, we would brief our minister, whoever that may be, to say this is what has been introduced, and our starting position is that we would look to develop a Northern Ireland equivalent. That's just part of the resource that's picked up within the staff I have allocated to take forward all social security.
And yet now it's still a focus of the Minister himself that this bill should be developed.
Well, I would have briefed him on the GB measures. I did meet with him about it, and he has agreed in principle that the bill, and so he has written to his executive colleagues.
Yep. Just can I pick up briefly before I come to Kelly to pick up on a point of Manisha's? So are there implications for the block grant if parity is, if there's any changes?
I can't say that there won't be. We haven't had those conversations. If where parity is not maintained, and generally where parity is not maintained on the delivery of benefits, or in this case obviously benefit security or debt recovery, what we find is DWP are quite relaxed about it, as long as it doesn't impact on the amount of benefit paid, or in this case the amount of benefit recovered. If Northern Ireland deviates from the DWP position in that regard, then that is a conversation that generally has to be had at finance level. So we would pass that off to our colleagues in DOF to speak to Treasury. There's no, obviously we're not under any indication at the moment that we're not going to maintain parity, and I am not saying that we are. Obviously we're at the very start of this process. If that is something that the committee wishes us to do, or if our minister wishes to do, then those are the conversations we start having. But the challenge there is, if we don't know what we're not maintaining parity with, it would be identifying what that cost would be. But if we, and sorry I keep using the term we, this would actually be the Assembly. If the Assembly decides to adopt a different or pass a different bill with some measures not there, then those conversations would have to be had while the bill is progressing. But there is certainly the possibility that the Treasury would seek to penalise the department through the block grant.
And related to that, just briefly as well, is there any guarantee from Treasury that any monies recovered would stay here?
That would be part of normal debt recovery, or
It's normal debt recovery, so no, it goes. There's really no agreement to my knowledge. No.
So this investment would be a cost.
There have been, there haven't been any conversations with them in terms of these measures. So yes, if there's clearly going to be additional resources required for this, and I assume that would be met by the department. Sorry.
Okay, so going briefly to Kelly, and then I'm coming to Mark online. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for letting me in again. One of the issues with parity is whether or not we do it, or we let the equivalent government department in Westminster handle that. So at the moment in the paper that we have, it talks about DWP would be given powers. So if we just, as part of the conversation being happening at the moment, is whatever they're going to bring forward, are we going to do that here as part of a different bill, or are we just going to use their services and let them do it?
So we will bring forward, the proposal is to bring forward our own bill, at the moment replicating their measures, which would be delivered solely here within Northern Ireland. My understanding is DWP would not have any involvement in how these measures are applied here. Now, clearly some of the access to financial institutions, many of the financial institutions of course operate on a UK, an all-island basis, so those conversations we would probably piggyback on what they have done, because DWP are having conversations with the major banks in London. But the operational delivery, and again Julie can speak more to this, my understanding is no. This would be a wholly DFC.
Yeah. It's not a case of just adding Northern Ireland tagging on to their legislation, because my concern is, for instance, when it comes to children, overpayment by DWP is not pleasant to try to deal with, just on a personal basis, and I'll make a declaration on this. One Friday afternoon my husband called me and goes, why is there £6,500 in a joint account that we had? It was 3 payments had come in from before DWP, because I'm that old, and it was like we tried to give it back, and it was like 3 years of constant hassle about it. Those overpayments by DWP I'm concerned about, because while you're looking at fraud and error within the department here, there's other payments that people receive from parts of DWP or HMRC, and that needs to be considered. Will we have to write into our bill then a consideration of going back to them?
I don't believe so. So, payments made by HMRC would be solely a matter for them. Tax credit debt was transferred across to DWP and DFC. DWP makes some limited payments on behalf of DFC, but they're made on our behalf. They effectively act as an agent for us. Okay. So the obvious one is called winter fuel payments, and cold weather payments. Yeah. They're made by DWP on our behalf, but under our legislation, as the committee will know, because we refer to you. So those recovery powers of that would sit here. Okay. They effectively act as an agent.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. And Mark then, go ahead Mark, online, Lanarayla, the Cash 10, the hunt.
Where am I good? No, you'd actually hit on my main question there, that was going to be around the parity issue and around costs. And I know precedent had been cited of 2012 and 2015, but in those instances I think there was a direct, obvious and calculable cost of a breach of parity, but I'm not quite sure how it would be calculated here if we were still recovering money. Would it be deemed that it wasn't being recovered at the same rate as elsewhere? And obviously it would take a while to see if that was a pattern, so I'm not sure how that would be calculated. You said, sorry, it was said that we're currently recruiting fraud investigators, and and I suppose it's expected to go from 40 to 60. Is that directly related then, or contingent on this piece of legislation? Or if this wasn't in front of us, would that recruitment process be happening?
That recruitment is just to bring us up to our baseline, because we have lost so many fraud investigators through retirement, different job opportunities, whatever, over the last number of years. So the recruitment campaign is not linked to this at all.
So there would need to be, one would imagine, further recruitment should this pass.
Not necessarily. We need to model that out and see what our staffing requirements would be based on the bill if it does go through. So it wouldn't necessarily increase. We may just have to reprioritise and do things slightly differently, but it's something that we would look to model once we have the detail and once we know we're progressing.
And I mean, I would obviously share concerns that other members have given around this being both intrusive and draconian. I think were two of the adjectives used. Regarding, I suppose, interaction with HMRC, is there much in the way of that? Because I have seen now recently, actually, a few people coming to me and they've been subject of quite historic or prolonged investigations on ESA claimants, and both of these people have been self-employed and had been declaring everything to HMRC, so had been doing everything above board, or so they thought. However, they're still now accused of fraud. This is where the sort of client error, or what's described as client error, comes in. When you're going back that far, or investigations are going back that far, often the department won't have record of conversations or recordings of phone calls and people will claim did happen, and I have no reason to doubt that they did. So what is the relationship with HMRC?
In relation to the bill, I don't believe there's many provisions, or any provisions in the bill that really directly relate to HMRC. And with the closure of tax credits, I am not aware of any direct interactions in terms of benefits between the DFC and HMRC at the moment. If they have, as I say, I believe that the historic tax credit debts have been transferred. Beyond that, any debts that HMRC may be pursuing, I would assume, and again I'm making an assumption here, are related to tax. We don't, to my knowledge, have any direct interaction, and I don't believe, although I stand, Jennifer might want to, no,
it's not a HMRC debt though. It's related to someone's income that is being declared to HMRC. Therefore, demonstrates that they were being open and transparent about what they were earning.
Apologies. Yes, I misunderstood. I think Julie wants the answer.
Benefits doesn't know.
Yeah. So there are data sharing agreements with the department, jointly with the Department for Work and Pensions and DFC, with HMRC. So we do receive data sharing outputs in relation to various aspects of HMRC data. That does happen, and the likes of the ESSA customer that you relayed that example, just because someone has disclosed to HMRC, people assume that we will know as well, but that isn't the case. They need to disclose to the benefit paying office and HMRC. So I mean, if there was specific cases or instances of that, I'm happy to look at them, but there are overarching data sharing agreements in place with HMRC for specific pensions and income data. We also, in the fraud investigation space, have data sharing agreement in relation to specific information that we would need on an individual case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I won't go into the specifics of the individual case now, but just in general there, where someone might claim to have flagged it up with the department, and there's no record of that at the department end anymore. This could have happened 5, 7, 10 years ago, but by virtue of the stuff actually being registered with HMRC, it's almost demonstrative of good character of a person who is then being accused of fraud as well. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Andy?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions, really, and I'm struck by a lot of the responses to other colleagues that a lot of modelling and a lot of questions still need to be answered in relation to this, and obviously for us moving forward we want to obviously have the full picture before us. So with that in mind, if it is the desire of the Minister to take a bill forward, when do you envisage being in a position to introduce such a bill? Because from us, our perspective as a committee, and even just listening to members' questions, I've no doubt that there'll be many stakeholders will want to feed into this, so we will need appropriate time to obviously engage with any bill.
Probably at the very earliest would be sort of April next year. I would imagine, obviously, if the executive approved to have it on the legislative programme, we have to engage with OLC to draft the bill. So that would be the very earliest in which we would be introducing it.
And you would envisage at that time, April, if it is the desire to go ahead with the bill, a lot of those questions that members have posed that need further answers will have been addressed by that time. It's particularly around, any financial consequences if we don't maintain parity, specifically around the codes of practice and how this will work operationally. I'm interested in, because obviously systems are not always foolproof. And for example, how are those eligibility markers going to work with banks? Are they going to be automated, and what is the verification process going to be to make sure that data is the correct data? Because I'm sure colleagues will agree, compliance checks cause a great deal of anxiety and stress, and obviously we do need to tackle fraud, but that does come with a great deal of anxiety and stress for the claimant, and we need to make sure that data is the correct data, and banks have systems in place to be able to draw that information out efficiently.
I think regarding the codes of practice, DWP hope to be consulting them quite soon. So I think we will get a lot of information from that and be able to start and look at drafts for our own codes of practice. Some of the other information there, I can't guarantee that we would have that as the bill is being introduced, because there's test and learn processes that will be taken forward from DWP, and we'll still be learning from that, so I don't know that we'll have a full picture by the time the bill is being introduced.
But I can just say we will certainly, in anticipation of that, we'll be trying to gather as much information as we can. We appreciate not just the committee, but MLAs in general will want. You need the picture before you can make decisions. We understand that.
Yeah,
so we will be working on that.
Just with that in mind, has there been any conversation with GB around, is there the position for us to look at how it works in GB to make sure that any sort of issues that arise within this, they can iron out, and then we're able to be in a better position to introduce a piece of legislation?
Absolutely, we're working very closely with them, and we will certainly take on board any issues or problems and reflect that in our bill.
And I assume in most part the legislation that would be introduced here will be a direct lift from the GB legislation in most part?
That's the plan at the moment, yes.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
So if that's the plan, how will that take account of people potentially who live in the south but have paid in or work here or are part of the system here? How will that, if we just directly lift, how will it take account of that complexity?
Well, as I say, and to the most it will be a similar bill to DWP, but obviously we'll have to take into account the Northern Ireland position. So we'll have to be working with the OLC to see what differences we would have to put into the bill. But as I say, in the main, it would be, if we're bringing a parity bill in, it would be a direct lift.
I think it's worth saying, for us as a department, we're at the stage where Jennifer and her team have just finalised the instructions for OLC. So obviously I'm sure you're aware of the process that empowers them. This is what we want in the bill. But we are aware that, as I've already alluded to, Northern Ireland MPs had concerns. We're hearing the concerns here today. That is the process then we will work through over the next couple of months to feed into OLC into the instructions. So hopefully when we have a first draft of a bill, a draft of the bill that would be presented to the executive, assuming that they're in agreement with it, that by that stage we'll have addressed some of the concerns where we can. That's the policy work that my team and that Jennifer will be leading, will be working on over the next few months.
Yeah, in terms of human rights compliance, at what stage is that? And given also, taking the context of parties in Britain talking about withdrawing from the ECHR, it obviously applies here as a result of the Good Friday Agreement. How will that be taken into consideration?
Well, as far as Westminster are concerned, the provisions in the Pay for Bill are compatible with the Human Convention on Human Rights, and a bill for Northern Ireland, if it was to maintain parity, we would expect that would also comply. But obviously, as the Northern Ireland Bill will be issued to the Human Rights Commission for their inspection as it progresses.
Okay, and just a brief one, just as it occurs to me there, but in terms of that ability to look at people's bank accounts, what triggers that?
This is just a general notice that will go to certain banks, and where they identify if anyone, well, they'll look at codes for 3 different benefits that they're looking at the moment: universal credit, employment support allowance and pension credit, to identify if they have over the capital limits for that eligibility of that benefit, and if they've been abroad or taken money out abroad for over the time that's normally allowed. So it's more of a general notice.
It's just a general trawl. People's accounts will be looked at and spot what they're at.
In principle, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to say there's huge elements. I'm not surprised it has created huge concerns across the water, given the scope and scale of that, and given experience that we have in other areas. But anyway, can I just ask briefly, there's 5 of you here today, obviously working hard on this. How many other people within the department are working on the development of this bill at present?
They're actually largely sitting behind us here. So this is really the bill team. As I said, so 6 in total.
6 in total,
yeah. Who are working, that's their primary role. Of course, Julie has her team, and Donna is, I believe, probably the only person in your project at the moment.
I now have one other person to help with it, because we're at such early stages.
Okay, well listen, I appreciate you coming to committee today and engaging with committee. I appreciate the information you've sent through and your briefing, David, today, and thank you for that, and no doubt we'll see you again in due course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All the best. So members, I want to just pick up on maybe any further actions that members might want to consider at this stage. I think there's clearly a fair degree of concern around detail and implementation and impact. So is there any members at this stage want to flag up in terms of actions, or will we, Kelly?
I know that it's in process and it's consideration at this stage, so we're not saying it actually happens, but could we write to the head of the civil service to ask her about the safety of civil servants when they're being asked to go in and do debt recovery in people's homes, and whether or not that would be something under health and safety at work that there's particular Northern Ireland considerations that need to be made?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I just don't understand how that's going to work in practice. I just don't understand. I think that's certainly valid, Andy. Yeah.
The big one for me is the timeline. You know, if we're looking at April to introduce this potentially, and given, you know, okay, many of the questions that have been raised may well have been answered by that stage. But if I'm not wrong, that's what would that give us, about 11 months to go through the full legislative process, including whoever obviously is on this committee, whether it's us or other colleagues, to interact. And we've seen with other bills the importance of proper scrutiny.
100%, Andy. I think you're absolutely right. So what's the proposal out of that?
Well, I'm just sort of flagging that, you know, in that sense, you know, obviously that's the point in which they're working towards, and the wider legislative programme. I'm just concerned that, you know, if the later it's introduced, if that is the will of the Minister, and I think, you know, we've heard commentary around this before, and I think we're all in agreement as to the approach around fraud and error, but the later this is introduced, the more challenging it's going to be to offer a proper level of scrutiny to it.
And it's so impactful, I think proper scrutiny must be applied to it.
And that's the same, Chair, I would say, just to reinforce the point, I would say the same for any piece of legislation. I know in the last mandate, and Kelly was on the committee, our backs were really against the wall with the amount of legislation that was introduced, and we raised it on many occasions that we felt that the committee was being put in a very awkward position in relation to the amount of legislation we were having to scrutinise.
Yeah. Yep, okay. Sean, were you looking in there?
Yeah, I would be interested in knowing what the other devolved nations are doing, if possible.
And ask Reyes to have a look at the passage of the bill in Westminster and any other feedback from the devolved nations.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that Scotland is taking a different path.
That's one I was assuming,
Yeah, but it will be interesting to see what
In Scotland.
members content with those actions.
Thank you.
Okay, members, thank you.
Can I check, are we flagging the timeline issue to the department?
I think we've
I think we should. Yeah, I think we absolutely should. That this absolutely is an issue
Okay.
and an issue of concern to the committee.
So put it like this, if we are going to break parity if we don't get this bill processed, do you know what? If the committee stage isn't going to be able to be long enough for us to be able to do our scrutiny, it could be kicked into touch here. And they'll have to start all over again. So, you know, if they want us to get this through in this mandate, then they need to be honest about it or take it next mandate.
Yeah, I have to say that has been occurring to me as well. That is a real possibility.
Yeah, and I suppose just I would say is, look, if it is the will of the Minister and the Department to introduce the bill, you know, I'm not saying at this stage, obviously I'd need to discuss with colleagues, but I'm not saying that we would outright oppose it, but I would want to make sure that we're given the proper scrutiny and we allow stakeholders and we create that space for stakeholders to be able to come in. I think, you know, even if we look at the sign language bill, I know it's two completely different bills, but the amount of people that were interested, and I've no doubt there will be the same with this piece of legislation.
Yeah, and I mean, there was indications there that certain amounts of money in bank accounts or certain activity abroad will essentially trigger a fraud investigation, despite that we've heard that there's lots of reasons why those can be 100% legitimate. So it's extremely intrusive.
It's the intensity of the resources that are going to be needed to actually verify that.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get at, was that if that is just a, what did they say? Yeah, so it was just like a general trawl over the capital for those three benefits, for those three codes, but the amount of time it's going to take to then go into each of those accounts or to apply for investigative powers into each of those accounts to then do that.
Well, they're requesting that banks would do that against set markers, which is the purpose of this bill, and that's the point that I was raising with the officials around the accuracy of that data, you know, in the process that banks would employ, unless I'm picking it up wrong.
Yeah, the accuracy. Yeah, I take your point right, Andy. And then the follow up to assess whether or not that is fraudulent or legitimate. That's where the work will come in. That's where the resource will come in. The other thing can be done automatically. However, the Fujitsu thing worries me in that respect of these automatic thralls and computer systems being responsible for so much of the early part of it. Okay.
And the massive, sorry.
I was just going to pick up on Andy's point there. So if you imagine somebody is on universal credit, so the bank system already knows they're on benefits, and they've made an application for PIP, and because our process is so long, they could get a lump sum payment that covers the period of a year. Now that in itself wouldn't take somebody over the 16,000, but if they have any other savings, it could. A bank looks at any lump sum payment in cases of money laundering, so they're looking at that anyway, but the automatic assumption is, oh, you've done something wrong, and flagged to a department who then goes looking. That's the bit that I have difficulty with, is you're guilty until proven innocent.
And here's another example that we have heard in this committee. A farmer sells livestock at the end of the season, receives a large amount of money in. Where does that process end? Or spends a large amount of money at the start. You know, so there's or spends money abroad. Spends money abroad and stuff. So like there's so many unforeseens here. I think it's really a minefield, Andy.
I think for me the operational side of it's so important with this, and you know, I know the department do excellent work, and it's not the case that everybody is treated with suspicion, but you know, picking up on that point that Kelly's raised, you know, how will that work operationally? Well, the bank then flagged, say this person's in receipt of, they now have X amount of money in their account, which is now taking them above the capital threshold. So will that person then automatically be contacted? And what will the level of stress and anxiety be that causes? And ultimately there is no wrongdoing, and obviously where there is wrongdoing, then it should be pursued. But
and the
is
amount
that
of work
going to mean that many more people are going to be contacted by the social security system? And we already know it can be a difficult system to navigate, all the different nuances of it. So will people automatically be contacted? And that's for me why, you know, it should, the operational side of it should come in tandem with the legislation, and it's much like the school uniforms bill, you know, and we heard in the Assembly that many people wanted to see the guidance before, you know, the bill was passed, because that's where the proof is in the pudding. And I think this is similar here. You know, the operational side of it's going to be so crucial as to how this works in practice, if obviously the legislation comes forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's a lot there to be considered. Absolutely. Okay, members. Well, thank you for that. That's been a really useful session, and appreciate members' engagement on that issue. So we'll now move on to agenda item 10, which is departmental briefing. But can I say the next two agenda items are essentially a split briefing with the department and then with the sector in relation to the new or revised partnership agreement between the department and then from the sector representatives. So if I could ask members to just bear that in mind in terms of timing, this is kind of a split session rather than two fully allocated sessions, and we are slightly behind time as it sits at the minute. But anyway, I think we're grand in that sense if members bear that in mind. So we're moving on to the briefing between the partnership agreement between government and the voluntary and community sector. The briefing paper is at page, for the item is at page 383. And I'd now like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. So we have Raymond Caldwell, who's Director of Voluntary and Community Division. He's Chair of the Joint Forum Public Sector Panel and Joint Chair of the Joint Forum. Lorraine Gallagher is Head of Sectoral Policy and Engagement in the Voluntary and Community Division. And can I check, do we have Karen Smith?
Yes.
Yeah, Karen's here as well. And Karen is Head of Inclusion, Disability Action, Chair of Joint Forum, Voluntary and Community Sector Panel, and Co-Chair of Joint Forum. So Raymond, can I invite you, I think it is, to make a brief opening statement, and then we'll move to questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. So my name is Ray Caldwell. I'm delighted to join you at committee this morning, and I'm Director of Voluntary and Community Division at DFC. I'm joined by Lorraine Gallagher from my directorate, and also Karen Smith from Disability Action. And Karen is the Chair of the Joint Forum Voluntary and Community Sector Panel. So my directorate supports the voluntary and community sector through a focus on sectoral development in areas of leadership and voice, capacity and resilience, partnership and collaboration, and volunteering. And we also support financial inclusion and the proportionate regulation of charities. Now, importantly, the Voluntary and Community Division is one of many directorates within DFC and across NICS departments that supports the voluntary and community sector. It does not have sole responsibility of what is a very diverse voluntary and community sector. VCD has lead responsibility for strategic relationships with the sector through the facilitation of the Joint Forum, which acts as the main strategic engagement forum for all of government, including SOLAS and NICVA, with key leaders in the sector. I chair the Joint Forum Public Sector Group and co-chair the Joint Forum with Karen. Karen and I are delighted to jointly present the partnership agreement to you this morning on behalf of the Joint Forum. Now, the partnership agreement was co-designed by the Joint Forum and received executive endorsement on the 5th of July before being formally launched by the Communities Minister on the 17th of July earlier this year. It reflects a renewed and strengthened commitment between the Northern Ireland Executive and the voluntary and community sector. The partnership agreement sets out a direction of travel towards deeper collaboration and more inclusive policy making. It's a living framework, therefore it's essential that it doesn't become a document that just gathers dust. We must ensure that within our daily practice it is visible, actionable, and embedded in how we work. This means that all departments need to embed the principles of funding guidance, procurement processes, and programme design right across the executive. Now, work has started on the Joint Forum's rolling 3-year work plan. Working groups are progressing priority areas of evaluation, communication, and the exploration of fair funding practices, and also scoping legislative options which could potentially underpin the partnership agreement. Working groups with equal representation from both the public sector and the voluntary and community sector have been established and are currently progressing priority areas of work. The Communications Working Group will develop a joint forum communication plan with the aim of raising awareness and support the practical implementation of the partnership agreement, ways of working and fair funding principles, and also the promotion of cross-sectoral awareness of the role and work of the joint forum. To measure impact, the evaluation framework will be developed by the Evaluation Working Group, and this will be used to evaluate the impact and implementation of the partnership agreement, ways of working and fair funding principles. This group will also lead on developing an annual report format and process. A subgroup of the Evaluation Working Group will critically review a range of fair funding approaches. Now, this group will look to identify good practice examples across the fair funding principles and potentially identify even better if scenarios. Using these good practice examples, the aim is also to build capacity and understanding of how fair funding principles can be applied most effectively going forward. Finally, the Statutory Duty Working Group will explore the rationale for a statutory duty in support of the partnership agreement and its commitments, reviewing the evidence, rationale and benefits of both a statutory and non-statutory approach. This work will support visibly the implementation of the partnership agreement. We're aware that visibility matters in demonstrating partnership working in practice through joint planning, shared decision making and co-delivery. We believe will build trust and momentum. Every department is represented on the public sector group of the joint forum, with local government represented by SOLAS and NICVA. Every representative will play a role in implementing, communicating and raising awareness of the partnership agreement within their own department or community of interest. The work has been undertaken by the joint forum working groups, and it will support and steer to ensure consistency and alignment with overall objectives. Before I hand over to Karen, I'll conclude by saying that the partnership agreement is a foundation for action, and we're committed to working with the voluntary and community sector partners to make a real, practical and impactful change. We look forward to sharing progress with you as committee members in the years ahead. And now I'd like to hand over to Karen, my joint forum co-chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ray, and thank you, committee and chair, for the time with you today. As Ray says, I am the current voluntary and community sector panel chair. I've had the joy of being on the joint forum for the previous term, and in that time I primarily focused on the development of the fair funding principles in a working group. So as Ray describes the working group process, that's what we did last term. Now, it's interesting to note that the current voluntary sector panel members, of which you have a list, 3/4 of them now in this current new term are new to the joint forum. And they brought with them an appetite and a passion for change and for really seeing the wording and the commitments in the partnership agreement being realised in action. And that sits at the heart, as Ray has covered, in terms of our collaborative approach. So in developing the fair funding principles, it was really clear from that work and the consultation that we did out wide to the sector during the development of those principles that the daily funding arrangements cause massive challenge to the sector, and those are challenges that this committee is well aware of and has had representation on for some time. And so the fair funding principles are front and centre for us as a voluntary and community sector, and that means tackling some of those really difficult issues around multi-year budgets, full cost recovery, payments in advance, even if we could get to that point. And so the work of the working groups for this term all collaborate around those kind of objectives for us as the Voluntary and Community Sector panel members, who come from a very diverse backgrounds, as you will see from the list, and very diverse focus and themes across all of the priority groups across Programme for Government. And we then come together and have collaborated in development of the partnership agreement and those fair funding principles that we believe are sensible, deliverable, and should make a difference. And we're doing that on the background of having come through a long process of relationship management between us that has, in my description, transactional rather than collaborative relationship development. So in my role as the VCS panel chair, it's really to bring that passion and enthusiasm to the work that we have. I'm delighted that the working groups have got underway and that we are carefully considering what kind of examples of current and historical funding relationships that we might bring to this work in order to fully explore and robustly explore how funding has worked in practice, and, to use Ray's term, could be better if. Now, we do slightly disagree on whether that's all around good practice examples, because from a voluntary and community sector perspective, we would also want to see some real robust analysis of the kind of things that have the negative impacts on the voluntary and community sector and our longevity, sustainability, etc. But we'll work through that in a fully collaborative process together and draw the views of both our voluntary and community sector panel members and the wider and voluntary community sector itself. So just to highlight in terms of the working group, when it comes to communications, that joint group has a very clear mandate there around actually having the work of the joint forum and the partnership agreement much more visible everywhere. And we mean by that everywhere in terms of right across all of the stakeholders in the voluntary and community sector itself, and everywhere across the whole of the 11 council areas that we all operate in. And that's bringing really fresh ideas and fresh impetus to us in terms of what that could look like that's different from what we've done before. So we're really, really delighted and pleased about that. The second area around evaluation, absolutely critical. We need to have tangibles, real actions that we can measure, that we can be accountable for, and that, as my voluntary sector panel members ask, that they have tangible benefit and impact. And then the statutory duty is something that in the previous term, voluntary and community sector panel members were passionate and committed to, and indeed we will give that thorough exploration and development of the potential there. And then just finally, just to revisit the fair funding principles, that is work that's underway in terms of scoping that out. We believe that the value of the work we take forward there could be realised with some external, if you like, consultancy support as well, so that we're bringing a balanced approach and balanced measures into the work itself, and that we've got shared appreciation of both viewpoints in taking that work forward. So we've been scoping that as well. So we had our last, most recent joint forum meeting on the 25th of October, and that was very much looking at collaboration in action in terms of how we work together going forward. And we had an excellent session with the Youth Start Consortium about collaboration and partnership in action in practical and operational terms. And that's how we develop our reach, is being able to show how this can work in practice. And so we've got a great programme going forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just one from me for now, and then I'll go to members. I have Kelly and Melissa indicating. So the brief states that there's no memorandum of understanding underpinning the partnership agreement because it's not about enforceable commitments at this time. Without enforceable commitments, does that risk reducing the agreement to a little more aspiration? And does the reference to at this time mean that a memorandum of understanding is being developed?
Chair, would you like to ask me that one to answer first?
Or anyone who's wants to pick it up.
I hadn't had any discussions around a memorandum of understanding in the work that we've been doing together to date. I have to say for myself that I believe the partnership agreement, if fully enacted and shared across all joint forum members and the wider sector, can deliver on the commitments that it makes without a memorandum of understanding. But the proof is in that actually happening over the coming months and in this term of the joint forum.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Chair, from a departmental perspective, I think there are two aspects to the joint forum. Obviously, one is the voluntary and community sector panel that Karen would chair. But there's also the public sector group. And that's an opportunity. It has representation right across all civil service departments. And it's an opportunity to come together and discuss. The expectation is that we would see the partnership agreement being a living document, and the fair funding principles, ways of working, and the other guiding principles being developed and implemented right across. So that's a really important mechanism to come together, to share, to challenge, to discuss, and even to getting into the detail around fair funding principles. Karen also alluded to, and I mentioned it in the opening comments around the statutory duties working group. So they're giving active consideration, and there are benefits and disadvantages to having a statutory footing to the fair funding, to the partnership agreement. And even if we look across other jurisdictions, you'll see that there's variation there. So Scotland and England would have non-statutory equivalents, if you like, and Wales would have a statutory footing for the government's relationship with the voluntary and community sector. But again, there are advantages and disadvantages, and they're the sorts of things that will be explored by the working group over the next year. And we would expect.
Can I just say, so we have very specific complexity and additional issues here, leading to the need for fair employment and treatment laws. So I think it's essential that those tenets apply, and I do note those 4 tenets, and I think those will be an area of scrutiny for the committee over the next period of time in relation to other strands of the department's work around fair allocation of funding in a number of announcements. But I just want to flag, Raymond, that it's my view that we have to go a step beyond to ensure that maybe some of the other areas you're talking about would have been historically doing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point, Chair, but I think also the reporting mechanism. I mean, there is a mandate within the partnership agreement for a report to be led before Assembly Executive, and that will be an opportunity to look at how the partnership agreement is working in practice, what the strengths, and if there's areas that need to be developed further. So there are accountability mechanisms built in that will allow us to respond to without a memorandum of understanding.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go now to members. Just a reminder again, NICVA are coming next, so maybe some of the questions are more relevant to them, so please bear that in mind when going through the questions, and be as brief as possible and succinct as possible. Thank you. So Kelly, Melissa, then Sian.
Thank you all for coming along today, and I don't really have to declare an interest anymore, but I did work in the community and voluntary sector for a long time before I became an MLA, and was involved in the very first Concordat, which was quite a while ago. Right, I've looked at your paper, and there's section 21, when it talks about the executive endorsement of the agreement and alongside their partners, what all the departments would be required to do. There's nothing in this that says to me what happens when they don't do that. Is there any consideration of that? Because, to be honest, I could win a few battles by going back on what they didn't do for me. over many years. So I just wonder, what is the accountability mechanism for the departments failing to deliver on this agreement?
Yeah, I think the evaluation working group and figuring out firstly how we make that visible and surface the gaps or the, you know, I wouldn't say non-compliance is the word because we're not, I suppose, in the space of policing it, so to speak.
No,
but
it's definite non-compliance when I have education that have a contract that specifically excludes the community and voluntary sector from being a delivery agent. So there are clear breaches that I'm looking at this and going, this doesn't stand up.
Yeah. I think that is what we're hoping the evaluation framework will pick up. And, you know, it may be that we need to surface why those things are happening. Is it a communication, you know, need? Is it a capacity building piece? Obviously, we're trying to pick that up in the communications working group and the fair funding working group around demonstrating how this can be done. But I don't think at this moment in time we are in a policing space around this. I do think we're early. We're trying to build the structures at the minute for the longer term. You know,
in a very long time, it's quite difficult for me to hear that whenever it's been needed a policing for many years. I had a department official say to me when I was working in the community and voluntary sector, "You're part of an arm's length body. I own you. You'll do what I say." I wasn't. I was a member of the community and voluntary sector, and he didn't know what an arm's length body was. So I think there is something there. I am concerned about the input of community and voluntary sector experiences with departments over the years. Is that being recorded as part of this?
we haven't really captured exactly how we're recording or what we're recording in terms of that evaluation work that is being taken forward by that working group, which is made up of VC sector reps and public sector reps. I don't think probably the order of it will be to see what the priorities are in terms of that full list of shared values and fair funding principles that are detailed in the partnership agreement. We may not be able to record and monitor everything at once, might have to take it step by step, but we're letting that evaluation working group do their piece at the minute, and then that'll come back to the joint forum for approval and through Ray and Karen as the joint chairs.
Can I just check as well, you've talked about a report will be coming forward and laid to the Assembly. One of the frustrations that I have sitting on this committee is reports come forward from the Department for Communities and it only includes Department for Communities information. Will there be a requirement for all of the other departments to provide information to that, and what if they don't?
Okay, so if I can pick up on that point, the evaluation working group that's been set up, one of the first things that they're going to do is actually identify a framework for evaluation. Within that framework, the report that will be led will be part of it. But yes, it will absolutely include input across all departments and the voluntary and community sector in the spirit of the partnership agreement. And I think it's important to recognise that DFC is a lead strategic partner, but this is a partnership agreement that has had approval right across the executive, and we're engaging with all NICS departments on its implementation.
And my final one is Department for Communities is the lead with the voluntary and community sector, or community and voluntary sector in Northern Ireland. However, whenever we have issues as MLAs with other departments and how they are treating community and voluntary sector, the Department for Communities walks away from it. Is there any clarification of actually who is taking responsibility for the actions of these other departments?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier the public sector group, which is obviously one group within the joint forum, and we would view that as a key group for being able to discuss those issues and have shared understanding right across executive departments of how the partnership agreement is being taken forward. So if you take as an example the fair funding principles, we have already had discussions within the public sector group that there's a clear expectation that any new funding arrangements or any that are being reviewed will be reviewed and developed in line with the fair funding principles. Now, Karen had talked earlier about the backward look, and yes, there are lessons to be learned from the past, but I think it's also important that we draw a clear line and are aware of and develop our funding arrangements aligned with those going forward. And in terms of VCD and the Department for Communities, we will be walking that walk, and as we review, for example, our infrastructure support framework and the funding that flows from that, we will be developing new funding arrangements that align fully with the fair funding principles so that we can demonstrate best practice. And we're very happy to come back and report back to the committee in future years on how that's working out.
That would be very helpful. I'm very, very aware as of the 31st of December, we have a number of community and voluntary sector organisations that will be putting staff on redundancy notices, including the Shared Prosperity Fund recipients. And to be honest, most of the government departments haven't come forward with any indication of what money's going to be. So if you haven't been there and done that for 20 years, I'm a little bit concerned that we have all of this wonderful talk happening and we still have people being made redundant on the 31st of December. Happy Christmas, you know, to the community voluntary side. Nobody else is getting made redundant. But I look forward to the work. I support you in that work, and I would gladly kick every other department that doesn't follow the lines that you've brought forward for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Melissa, let it hold on, right?
Thank you, Rose. You're all very welcome. Again, too, just staying with the fair funding principles, what practical effect will they have on funding in the voluntary and charity sector?
Okay, so I'm going to refer back to the working group that's been established first. So part of the work of that working group is to consider the fair funding principles, and in guiding the working group, we would like them to look at identifying, this is where the voluntary and community sector will come together, and government departments will come together to look and see, well, what funding arrangements are currently in place that align with some or all of those fair funding principles. And that's the term that we're using, even better if. So we could have and do have effective funding relationships, but what aspects are they effective in across the fair funding principles, and how could they be even better if they were being refreshed and reviewed? So that will be a key piece of work that working group is taking forward, and we would expect to be able to report on that within the next year.
I'm sure that you're aware too of, for a number of months, that Parenting Focus had to close its doors after 46 years due to a lack of and inconsistent funding as such. Then just some time after that, the Minister announced then that there's £1 million, is it, for marching bands. Is this the type of situation that fair funding principles could be applied to, or that they could take issue with?
So we recognise that there's a communication piece that is needed, both across government departments, civil service departments, and across the voluntary and community sector, to explain what the fair funding principles are, and also to articulate what they are not, but actually to use them as a vehicle and mechanism for improvement going forward. So scrutiny, none of the funding arrangements that are currently in place were developed in line with the fair funding principles. So we recognise, that looking backwards, there's no expectation that they would align with principles that weren't actually in place at that time. But that is not the expectation going forward. And I would also make the point that the partnership agreement was co-developed by the Joint Forum with input from the voluntary and community sector, and engagement and input right across all departments. So all departments have actually fed in and had a part in developing the partnership agreement. It hasn't been developed by DFC and sort of imposed on the other departments. It has actually been co-developed and co-designed together with the voluntary and community sector.
Well, I can appreciate that what has happened, we'll say historically, but just again, and should my question in relation to the marching bands, £1 million, and yet now then we have the doors closing for Parenting Focus at the same time. Is that not something that should be considered under the fair funding principles?
I mean, I don't think that maybe the fair funding principles are in the space of the decisions that are taking place prior to the, if you're looking just solely at the fair funding piece, not the full partnership agreement. So they're sort of decisions that, are taken prior to that. The fair funding principles are about once you've made that decision to fund or work with that voluntary and community sector group, that's, these are the principles that you should be applying to how your grant funding agreements are being put out there. So I don't know that the fair funding principles can, come in and disrupt those decisions, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that.
Just to clarify, I think what Melissa's referring to are decisions made within the past year or two. So this is not historic. This is current decisions this department's making.
Yeah.
How much that fair funding model will have a position over budgeting decisions? We're in the process now of that.
Yeah.
if somebody has discretionary spend, then surely it should be for the priorities.
This is a recent decision.
Yeah.
That's to say it's not something that I can understand historically how it is that you're not in the same position to deal with issues that have happened in the past, but this is recent.
They're not in the space of, you know, being taken into account as part of budgeting decisions. If you know what I mean, if the way it's read, therefore, once those decisions are made and how you apply them.
Yeah.
So I wonder how effective they can be.
Well, I think we need to give it a chance. You know, the partnership agreement was launched in July. The working groups have been established and are taking forward the work, and one of those working groups will be looking at fair funding principles. You know, clearly there's a clear expectation that all new arrangements would be developed and align with and demonstrate best practice, and I think that's where, you know, we can hold to account if they are or they're not going forward. But decisions that have been taken prior to the working group being able to take this forward.
So that's in relation to this partnership. So there is a slight overlap here, and I think I'll just pull back. So I think what we're getting is a strong sense that will apply to this partnership. The concern probably being raised is whether or not these principles have been applied to previous recent announcements. But we'll come back to those, Melissa. But I
just make my final point: is it an aspiration rather than something that will have teeth?
Well, I think, you know, the partnership agreement has been given executive approval, and it has been launched, and there's a clear commitment across all departments, you know, to deliver on the partnership agreement, and that will be a key focus of the evaluation piece and the reporting mechanism that will come, you know, in due course. So I think to answer the question very plainly, we believe it's more than an aspiration, and we want to see tangible action and change, and practical change as a result.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. So, Karen, I'm going to have to keep moving on because we have got several more indications now from members. We are significantly now over time. We have consideration of our bill to take into account. So can I ask members to be really brief, one or two very brief questions, please, and a quick response. Sharon.
Mine was covered just around how many current opportunities for funding fit into those. So that aspect is finished, is answered. But going forward, is it the aspiration that all statutory departments will be adhering to multi-year budgets, to payments in advance? Sorry, I've written that down. That's not a commitment. That's maybe a hope, is it?
It is.
But the full cost recovery potential. So is that the aspiration?
It is, and there will be work undertaken around, for example, full cost recovery, sort of articulating and understanding what that is, and, you know, support, you know, would be envisaged, you know, when an application is being made, support and guidance around factoring in all the costs rather than identifying costs after the funding has been delivered, and that would be a key element to full cost recovery going forward.
And then as we move into our stage of multi-year budgets, are we in the space of doing that from the multi-year budget that's coming forwhave
That would be the aspiration.
Okay.
Okay. Nicola, your hand has come down. Can I check? Are you okay now, or have you?
Yeah, that's okay. I was going to comment on the parenting NI issue as well, but it's been discussed now. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nicola. And Morris, briefly, please. Still not hearing you. Try that now, Morris. No, not here. Yeah.
There we go.
You can hear me now?
Yes, got you now, although it may be breaking up a little, but give it a go, Morris, please.
No, it's just a point was raised during the discussion there about the overall plans. Are they aspirational, or is there any legislation coming along with it? So if we could bear that in mind as we move forward. Another thing is about the grants to the marching bands. We had a presentation in Stormont, and I think Mark was there too, from the Londonderry Bands Forum. We have some excellent musicians on offer, and funding accrues bands. It helps bands buy instruments and uniforms, and to teach young people music and to give them an interest in what is actually an arts programme. So just to make that clear, thank you.
Thank you, Morris. Okay, members, thank you. So I'll thank the members of the panel. I know Karen is going to stay on with us into the next panel, and appreciate that. So we'll go ahead now and Move to the NICVA briefing, which is agenda item 11. It's oral evidence from NICVA in relation to the partnership agreement between government and the voluntary and community sector. Thank you, Raymond, and your team for your previous piece. And we now welcome to the table, sorry to say that, the briefing paper for this item is at page 397, members. We're now joined by the following officials. So we have Jonny Currie from NICVA. He's Director of Policy and Insight. We have Karen Smith remaining with us. She's in the Joint Forum, Joint Chair and Head of Inclusion in Disability Action. And that's our panel. So go ahead then, Jonny. I think it's yourself making some brief remarks, and we'll move to members' questions.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Karen, just wondered if you had any further remarks you wanted to make before I go on from the NICVA?
Well, yes, I mean, the questions, and thank you, Jonny, thank you, Chair. The questions that members have asked are really relevant for us as a sector and for the work that we're doing. It was clear during the previous term, and as we go into this term, that when working with department colleagues, there was a recognition that awareness, understanding, and relatability to the work we were doing is sporadic. And certainly I have brought this partnership agreement into every discussion I'm having with any of the departments that we do business with, and started that process. And I think that's really pivotal to have those conversations and to be able to say, what does this mean to you? And if it doesn't mean anything, what process can we undertake here together? So that has been front and centre in my mind through the previous term and this term, and needs to be the focus for us going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And Jonny.
Thank you, committee, for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. You know what NICVA does with a voluntary and community sector umbrella body. We support and champion the sector through support, influence, through innovation and through leadership. And our policy priorities that we identified this year are around deepening government engagement and policy support for the voluntary and community sector, securing sustainable and fair funding models, advocating for the sector as a key civil society voice that's trusted as an essential partner alongside government in the private sector, and strengthening community engagement and empowerment. We believe that those priorities align directly with the aims of the partnership agreement and the opportunity that it provides to embed fairness, collaboration and accountability through that government and voluntary community sector relationship. We act as joint secretariat to the Joint Forum. We provide facilitation as well as development support, and we're also responsible for the recruitment and the appointment of those 19 VCS reps that are included in your paper, that has a broad geographical and thematic remit. Why this matters now, and I'm not going through the briefing paper line by line, have it in front of you. Our sector is large in reach, local in presence, but lean in resources. Provides essential public services, builds social cohesion, supports some of the most vulnerable people across our communities, but is under serious pressure. We produced a workforce research report back in July 2024 that was before the national insurance contributions increase, that already showed that our sector is under severe pressure in terms of recruitment, low pay and short-term funding is a major obstacle. So we believe that the partnership agreement, and we've been here before, I've outlined where we've been in terms of previous documents that we've had over the last 25 years, starting with the Compact, through the Partners for Change, Positive Steps, the Concordat, to where we are now. Those frameworks trace a consistent pattern, strong statements of intent, valuable pilot initiatives, but we've had loads of pilots, we need to start to build airplanes and build airports, followed by limited follow-through. So the principles alone are insufficient. We need resourcing, we need accountability and cultural change across government. I think this partnership agreement is an opportunity to learn from that history. And we're also within the context of a civil society covenant that's been produced at Westminster, that was launched in July at the same time. Again, it's a principles-based framework. It's designed to reset relationships between government and civil society across the UK. It has some differences compared to the partnership agreement, but it needs to deliver tangible change in order for that to be a success. We need cross-sectoral engagement, plus we need buy-in from government. We need some quick wins. Some of those from NICVA's perspective would be prompt payment targets across all departments, multi-year funding with full cost recovery, the publication of standardised grant and contract templates that are consistent with the fair funding principles, and an annual partnership report that summarises progress. We believe there are some live policy areas where we believe the partnership agreement can make a difference. There are a few mentioned in the briefing paper there. It would be remiss of me not to mention the Local Growth Fund and the opportunity to really test both the UK Civil Society Covenant through decisions made by Westminster, plus our partnership agreement in terms of steps that the Executive is going to make. There's a 70-30 capital resource split that's proposed for the Local Growth Fund that is unacceptable for Northern Ireland, and I think is a real test of the resolve of the Executive in terms of how it's going to ensure that that VCS-led delivery through the Shared Prosperity Fund that is over-delivering actually on its objectives. There was a partnership meeting yesterday of the UK SPF programme. During the first 6 months, we're over-delivering for the funding that the sector has been given. So that's an example of where the rubber needs to hit the road with partnership agreements.
Hey, Jonny, we're going to have to be pretty brief. So, yeah, thank you.
All safe for now.
Okay, thank you for that. So, I suppose I'm very struck by your positive approach to it. I have to say that's good to hear. However, you did mention strong intent and an experience or a history of limited follow through. Is your concern that the lack of memorandum of understanding could hollow out the potential of this agreement?
I think there are concerns around that, Colin. From a voluntary community sector point of view, we're incredibly relational in what we do. Through the context of the joint forum over the years, it has been a constant question around how much of this do we think should be embedded in law. I know there's a working group of the joint forum that's looking at some parts of that. So for us, it's going beyond the law into something that's really relational. Relationship building across government and the sector has been a huge part of why the joint forum exists. So in terms of a memorandum of understanding, I think what would help would be some early examples of where the partnership agreement can really make a difference. I think that might be more meaningful than a memorandum in the first instance, if there's some practical examples of where this can work. Karen, do you want to add anything on that?
No, you've absolutely captured it really well, Jonny. Thank you.
Yeah, and we will keep an eye to see, and we'll be keen to keep an eye and see that it is making that difference. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, guys. To be honest, what I would like to see is at long last the community and voluntary sector having funding on the 1st of April as opposed to the 31st of July or wherever that happens to come in. Guys, this has come through. The agreement came in July, yet we still have an extraordinary amount of people in the community and voluntary sector receiving redundancies on the 31st of December. I find it quite difficult to marry the two together. And as the Chair had mentioned, you know, this memorandum of understanding is as much for me to hold departments to account as it is for the community and voluntary sector. Has there been any discussion with the Minister for Finance or the Minister for Communities or through communities about the fact that we're still sitting with a load of redundancies being hit into a sector that is so important? To be honest, without the community and voluntary sector, this government would be bankrupt.
Yeah. So from NICVA's perspective, we have it ongoing. I mean, from a sector point of view, funding wise, it's a matter of choose your cliff edge. I don't need to tell you this. And so we do have ongoing engagement with those ministers. But it's I suppose to use our campaign around the Local Growth Fund and SPF, we had mentioned by the end of September we needed to have clarity on that funding position, and there was still no further details. So when we set deadlines and they're not met, it doesn't create a lot of hope within the voluntary community sector around. In the sector, you're kind of used to the 31st of December and being put on protected notice. I don't need to tell folks on the committee that reality. So that does lead to some resignation around these partnership agreements, sometimes in the difference they can make. But I guess from a sector's point of view, we're also a sector that just gets on and does things, tries to provide hope, tries to make a difference. So those are ongoing conversations that we're having, and we will continue to have those.
It would be lovely if we could see through the partnership arrangement that the other partners, the departments, have to step up to the plate, because I just feel like the community and voluntary sector is always giving its all. It's always bringing more volunteers in. It's always working without money, waiting for that funding to come, but the departments never change. Yeah.
There's also an assumption that the voluntary community sector will always be there. So there was an excellent workshop yesterday that the Department of Health was involved in around the neighbourhood model of care that's being proposed. And there's a huge role for the voluntary community sector to play initiatives like that, but we need to be resourced to still be there to be able to play that role.
And sorry, if I could add, yes, you know, I had been heartened, if I'm honest, Kelly, because Department of Finance have been front and centre within the Joint Forum Public Sector Group, as well as working collaboratively, you know, as part of the And I Can't Wait campaign, etc. However, deeply disappointed to see that we are no further forward, and in fact for our own organisation we've already had to begin that consultation process.
It's difficult. To be honest, when I worked in the community voluntary sector, I think I had one period where I had a 2-year contract of employment. The rest of it was all year by year by year. It takes the heart clean out of you. But I wanted to ask you about the overall measurement of impact. It's one thing that we don't have within government, is that understanding of the value of the community and voluntary sector. Is that something that will be worked on? Because I think if we can get one agreed measurement, then nobody, no civil servant, no department has the excuse of not understanding how valuable you are.
I'd like to answer that because it was a question that you'd asked, and I know that the department had briefed a response in terms of that. I'd have to say I disagree with that representation of the sector's own impetus and commitment to measuring its own impact, and indeed working with NICVA and CO3 in terms of rolling forward our approach, bringing in evaluators, working in exciting collaborative projects like Ulster University's Epic Futures, which is about bringing all the stakeholders together and really focusing on the evidence, the data, the research that provides us with much better analysis in order to collaboratively create new policy together. And we spend a lot of time as organisations individually in the transactional relationships I mentioned earlier, providing data over and over, management reporting, etc. The partnership agreement has sought to address that by saying this needs to be proportionate and it needs to be linked to impact. So let's address that within the work of the Joint Forum and the partnership agreement as well, because this is an area that causes us great concern because we don't have the funded posts to be able to invest in that ourselves. Bit of a catch-22 situation, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's what government wants to measure as well. The old phrase, not everything that counts can be counted and not everything that can be counted counts, springs to mind. We're up for impact. Our sector gathers that information. Something that the Joint Forum was keen on in some of our earlier work around the Concordat was to have the Concordat aligned with the programme for government, so that there's a shared understanding of what we measure, and it's put on that level actually alongside that, so we can track outcomes together, because we deliver outcomes together. That's the rationale behind the Joint Forum. We want to provide evidence of what we do. We do have it, but often we're not asked for the right things.
Thank you. I suspect the value in that is departments understanding the impact of what it is you're delivering for them. I think that's really the key to it. I think that's the nut that we'd love to crack. But listen, thank you very much. That's been very useful. We will keep an eye on as it goes forward. Obviously, it's given it's new, and we all want to ensure it beds in quickly and effectively and makes a difference. Appreciate your briefing today, your work on this issue, and thank you for attending. Okay, thank you, Jonny and Karen. Thank you. Okay, members, I'll pick up on any further actions members wish to highlight in relation to both those related sessions. So, is there anything in particular in terms of actions at this point that members want to suggest? Kelly?
Could I ask if we could write to the Department of Finance to ask if the fair funding principles are being requested? other departments are being asked to consider the fair funding principles when submitting to the Department of Finance for this multi-year budget, because I'm just concerned we'll have 3 years and we won't have those in there.
Members content with that suggestion?
Yeah.
Proposal? Yep. Agreed. Okay, thank you. Anything else, members? No. Well, if members agree, then what I would suggest now, before we move into the closed session and the bill consideration, that we have a quick comfort break. So can I ask the clerk to take us out of broadcasting, please?
Step out to do this IPG, so
Yep, okay.
you don't need me now, I've done all my bit.
You have indeed, and thank you.
Oh, wait until we get into
Street confirmed open.
Okay, members. So members, we're now back into open session, and we want to formally record follow-up actions for the record in relation to our informal consideration of these two clauses. So I could now ask the clerk to read the actions that we've agreed.
Yes, the committee has agreed in relation to all of clause 3 to ask the department to confirm that the guidance will be clear enough to give confidence to the sector in terms of defining what reasonable steps includes, and that given that clause 3.1 covers reasonable steps, seek assurance from the department that 3(2)(b) would not be used as a basis, or could not be used as a basis, for non-provision of service. And in relation to clause 4, 4(4), define public character. Could this be defined and explained better in the EFM? And for 4(5), would the department consider affirmative resolution when removing a prescribed organisation, except in the event that the removal is required purely due to a name change, and that negative procedure is used for adding a new prescribed organisation?
Yep.
Members content?
Members content, yep. Thank you, and thank you, clerk. Members, moving on to agenda item 13, forward work programme. Members, there's a copy of the forward work programme, is at page 845. Do members have any comments, or are you content to note the forward work programme? Content to note, yeah, thank you. Agenda item 14 is any other business. Do members have any other business they wish to raise?
I just have one really quick one, Chair, and it's just whether you could write a letter on behalf of the committee to congratulate Louise Gallagher on her recent acknowledgement of a lifetime achievement with the arts at a recent award ceremony. I can pass you over the details. She is the producer of Blue Lights.
Yep. Have you the detail on that? Are members content with that? Yep. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. There's just one thing. It's during committee now this morning. A press release has gone out from the department. Lions announces £150,000 investment in festive lighting for Mid and East Antrim. Now you'll see the press release in due course, I'm sure, but the detail involves around £135,000 of that is being provided by the department for communities. 15,000 by Mid and East Antrim Borough Council, which begs the question as to why the headline says that, or why the minister's announcing 150. But can we write to the department and ask sort of where has this money come from? Was there an application process for it? And will there be opportunities for other councils to avail of similar support?
Yep, and I think indeed how they correspond with, as we've discussed in this meeting, the Fair Employment and Treatment Order, and how that is being reflected in that announcement. Are members content that we seek further information?
Where the budget has come from, which budget line, and was there an application process, and will other council areas be able to apply for similar?
Yes, will they be afforded similar opportunities?
Yeah.
Members agreed, yep.
Members agreed. Yep, thank you, members.
And just one other thing,
yep.
Chair. There's been an article in the paper yesterday. It was around the JR on the rate support grant.
Yeah.
Funding, I think it's now able to proceed to the next stage. But if we could just get, I think I'd asked for something previously. I know we got a view of the report, are the impact assessment that had been done on the rate support grant. But if we could just get some sort of written briefing even from the department as to the current position in light of this latest development in the court process.
Members content to seek that information? Yep, thank you. Okay, members, any other business? No. Then moving on to agenda item 15, date, time and location of the next meeting. Our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 20th of November 2025 here in room 29. The meeting is now adjourned, and I thank all members for your very diligent and effective approach today in what has been quite a busy meeting. So thank you all members, thank you to the team, and thank you. Take us out of broadcasting, please.